thank you, Karl, for joining us today. For those of you that are listening, Karl Falk is in Denver, Colorado. He is the CEO and founder of a company called Botdoc that I've had the pleasure of working with over the last couple months. And just through we've had most of our interactions have been about the business and growing your business. But we've also had some conversations about you as an entrepreneur, which have been very inspiring to me because I love having conversations about how, number one, you're all in. I loved that, that one conversation we had, you said, I'm all in. This is going to work and it's being successful. And so I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to you and what you've done at Botdoc. So if you don't mind, just give me a little background about who you are. And then I want to talk through different phases of growth and how that's looked for Botdoc specifically as it relates to knowing, growing, and scaling your business. So talk about who you are, where you're from, all your kids that are going pro and all the different athletic fields and whatnot. So let me have it.
Yeah, well, thanks, Laura, for having me. It's always kind of a pleasure to chat. I think sometimes you get so busy, got your head down, running forward that you don't take much time to kind of reflect and look back.
Yeah.
There's been times on certain panels I've been on in the past where I've gotten questions from other people at different stages of companies, and I think kind of the key too is depending on whoever's listening to this, no one has ever been through a situation that other people haven't been.
Right.
So there's a lot to learn from history and a lot to learn from other people that have gone through it. So even if you think you got it all figured out, there's definitely a lot to learn from others.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely the mistake part too.
Yeah.
But my background, I originally grew up outside of Houston, but got transplanted to Colorado when after high school. Went to school here. Actually went to the Air Force Academy, played football there. Then was off from the Air Force for a handful of years, and then kind of settled back down here in Colorado back in 2004. And, different stages of my life. When I first got out, I was working for a big consulting firm and enjoyed what I was doing. We were taking emerging technology and trying to get it expedited through the government process to, instead of taking 20 to 7.5 years, 20 or 7.5 to 20 years to go through the acquisition cycle, we were trying to figure out how to do it in 6 months to a year. This is all kind of post 9/11, and because there was a lot of stuff in the labs that could save lives, but I kind of take that as kind of my first. I mean, it was kind of like entrepreneurial light, right? Like trying to cut through bureaucracy and expedite stuff. So, and then fast forward years later, and got into real estate, and that kind of trickled and went into some software related stuff and kind of put everything in a company that I started called Short Save. We were, excuse me, we were automating the defaulted mortgage business and, making it more like TurboTax and Priceline. And in doing so, with client feedback and whatnot, we inadvertently invented Botdoc. So here we are many years later.
That's right. Well, do you feel like like there were any milestones or markers? And, like if, for example, people who are listening that are considering starting a business or who thought about it but talked themselves out of it, like were there any milestones or, things that you remember along the way throughout your college or early career that you feel like you've thought about it and shied away from it? Or, I mean, because I know you don't just I guess maybe it sounds like you did, like you can fall into entrepreneurship, but there's got to be that drive in you to want to do it because there is a lot of, there are a lot of ups and downs. So
it's not for everybody, right? Like, I think people watch, in Europe, it's called the Lion's Den, Shark Tank. Sorry. A lot of people watch Shark Tank and they're like, oh yeah, that'd be awesome. Right. And, getting money from Mark Cuban and going off and doing this awesome business. But I will tell you, being an entrepreneur is not for everybody, and it's okay. It's okay if you're not an entrepreneur, but I
Yeah.
think you have to be kind of, you have to have the ability to jump and then figure stuff out. If you're going to sit down and try and figure and plan
Yeah.
everything out, hey, that's great. Like people say, write up a business plan. Well, it's garbage because it's always going to change. Um,
Right.
and it's actually garbage, right after you write it. You may have an initial plan of what you're going to do, but you got to be able to jump, do something, and be a problem solver, right? And just figure things out
Yeah.
as you go. And I think
Yeah.
for me, that's been a crucial aspect. You also got to be emotionally grounded because there's really really
Yeah.
highs and there's really really low lows, and you got to figure out how to kind of stay here, and
Yeah.
and kind of live in that space too.
Yeah. It sounds, I'm sure that your time at the Air Force Academy probably helped you in your resilience and learn
Maybe that's right.
maybe add a little that grit factor probably
Right.
probably
My
didn't
4 year
hurt you much.
prison sentence. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's awesome. So let's talk about, okay, knowing what you wanted to do. So you said it was called, you started a business called Short Stay. Well, that's not what the name of your business is now. So that sounds like maybe one pivot that you made. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that? Because
Yeah.
that's part of knowing who you are, which it sounds like you did a little pivot.
Well, I think kind of to kind of transition too from your last point into this, you have to do something like that you're driven. Like there's got to be a reason you're driven for something, right? So I
Right.
tell people I got pissed off one day and decided to do something about it, and that was really my driving force. Like some people,
Yeah.
maybe they had a loss of a family member, and they said, you know what, like that's why they're doing something, or maybe their kid, something happened with their kid, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to do this, or maybe they went to work in corporate America and they got screwed over, and they said, you know what, I can do a better job on my own, and I'm going to prove them wrong. Right? I'm leaving. I'm going off to do my
Hmm.
own thing. So, I mean, there's always a reason. There has to be a reason. Um, for me, it was I just got pissed off at the kind of the bureaucratic processes that were going on during the crash, and my thing was is I felt like it should work more like TurboTax and Priceline, because really
Hmm.
in that stage of that business, it was how do you, instead of it taking 8 months, if it's just data and an algorithm like an equation, it should take a second. Take a couple seconds to
Right.
decide instead of 8 months. So really, that was kind of my push, my frustration, because I was in that industry, and I decided to leap. I didn't know I couldn't code. I think that's kind of, I'm kind of the oddball. Usually, tech founders are technical because they just went
Yeah.
off and did something and it kind of worked. But what I did is I found some guys that were really really smart, and
Yeah.
and they helped me do that. But yeah, what we started out doing is totally different than what we're doing today. It's still
Yeah.
the same company. We just have a DBA for Botdoc, but there was a pivotal point where we invented something inside of our software that our clients really latched onto. And at the time, it was kind of a weird decision because we decided to pivot the entire company and focus just on that. So some people were like, "What are you doing?"
Talk about that. Yeah, like how did you know, okay, this whole thing is not going to be it, it's just going to be this thing. Like that would be a hard decision to make to cut, because to me that
Yeah.
speaks like change pivoting like that to me says we're not going to make as much money if we go more
Well,
focused, which is usually the opposite.
yeah.
Usually the more focused you go, the more money you do make. But so like how did you decide to pick one part of what you were doing and stick with that?
So part of me was, there was an ego piece, and I always tell even my team, you've heard me say this, Lori, like check your ego at the door, right? Like if we
Yeah.
have to be able to sit and figure out the best way to do something, and it may not be what I think, or maybe it be what somebody else thinks, or whatever. And again, I had this grand vision. We were going to redefine the more defaulted mortgage space, and kind of go down that road. And everyone knew it. Friends, family, everyone knew that this is what we're doing. And it took a lot for me to say, hey, we're not doing that anymore. We're doing this. Right. Because people, I thought, man, people are thinking I'm crazy. Right. They think, what the hell is Karl doing? And here's why I made the decision. So the software that we had made, our clients were using it. They loved it, right? We had servicers, we had investors that were using it as well, that owned the defaulted notes. And we listened to our clients. And I think that was absolutely key. Like not a lot of people know Twitter. Everyone knows Twitter, right? Do you know that that actually started as a podcast company? Like they were trying to do podcasts,
Yeah, I don't know.
right?
Interesting.
So
And
yeah,
the clients were like, we don't want a podcast.
right. Well,
Interesting.
they kind of figured out. I don't know all the details, but they were going down that road, and they're nothing of podcasts today, right?
Right. Right.
And they become something totally different. So I think what you have to do is you have to have kind of a guiding light, right? Like we have a North Star at Botdoc. We
Yeah.
know what our North Star is, but our path is undefined, right? So sometimes you have to push.
Yeah.
You kind of know where you're going, and you get to a point where you got to pick path. And I think
Right.
as long as you're looking at where you need to go, I think it's an easier decision. So for us, we listened to our clients, and then
Yeah.
that was our fork in the road. And
Yeah.
I had enough data to say, wow, what they're asking for, because what they were asking for, we built, and it was just part of the overall software. And when they said, hey, can you make that a separate product? I was at this fork in the road. And what I had to do is I said, I know where I want to go. Does the future look brighter taking this path, or does it look brighter taking this path? And I sat back and I said, wow, okay, we're very focused on defaulted mortgages if we stay the course. But this product has reaches into different industries, right?
Right.
Multiple industries, multiple verticals, um, and it's different, and it solved a huge problem. So I was able to sit back and go, wow, okay, it's a big shift, but it's something we already have.
Yeah.
And it was something that we actually had people already using and testing, and
Yeah.
giving us feedback on. So
That's
even though
huge. That's huge.
yeah, it was a big decision, but it was easy to make.
Yeah. So I guess that could be a good little nugget for those that are maybe where you are or where you were is, getting customer feedback can really help you change, if you're hinging on a big decision or trying to figure out, because sometimes it comes down to like, you know, where's I feel like there's always a crossroads of like passion and then where's the money coming from? So you kind of have to use your sense and make sure that you're going to be able to fund your own business, but also like having those conversations with clients, which can sometimes take time and not be something you necessarily want to do or would think to
Right.
do first is really important.
And I think part of it too, Laura, something that's helped me even since that point in time. Something that helped me was, and I know you and I have talked about this, but um, I was never a history buff in school. In fact, I
Yeah.
kind of hated
Yeah.
history, like
Same.
whatever, right? And since I've gotten into business, I've become more and more of a history fan,
Yeah.
because I'm like, okay, I'm not the only person to ever be at this point, right? Other
Right.
people have had to make these decisions. What did they do? Why did they make
Yeah.
decisions? Were they successful? Did they fail? And I know we talked about like even the history, the H2 series, Men Who Built America. It's actually really, really
Hmm.
cool. And anybody who's an entrepreneur should
Yeah.
watch it. But for
Yeah.
me, um, it depends on how you define your company. And I look at history. So the railroad companies at the turn of the century, right? They were, post Civil War, they were kind of the end all be all, right? They were the Amazons of the day, right? Vanderbilt, Carnegie at that time worked for a competitor, Vanderbilt, and they basically owned, even before Rockefeller came along. Like they were like
Yeah.
they controlled the economy. And
Mm.
where are they today? Like I don't even know if anybody. I'd be shocked if anybody could actually name like the top two, even the
Any of the
top,
original.
or even
Yeah.
today. Who like what's the top or top two rail lines? I don't even know. right?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah, right,
I don't get on trains very often.
right, exactly,
Isn't
right.
that funny?
And what's
Yeah,
interesting is, so how do you go from being the pivotal cornerstone of America to now like, right? Who are they? And here's
yeah,
why.
yeah.
They went back in the day, they said we are railroad companies. Okay, that's a very narrow focused outlook on the
You're
world,
right.
right? Imagine if they said we
Instead
were
of transportation.
correct. If the
Yeah,
railroad companies
yeah,
had said
yeah.
we are transportation companies and our goal is to transport things, when the motorized vehicle came along, what would they have done? They would have been like, all right,
Scoop
they would
that
have
right
been
on
FedEx.
up.
They
Yeah,
would have been FedEx
yeah,
or UPS today.
yeah,
When the
yeah,
airplane
yeah.
was invented, somebody would have sat back and said, we could move stuff with a plane, right?
Right,
And heck, who
right.
knows? they may have they may have ultimately become a big internet provider saying, well, hold on, we're
We might, yeah.
moving,
Who knows?
data,
Data. Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
so who
yeah.
knows,
That's
right?
interesting. That's
So
so it's all about keeping your head up. It sounds like because that's a big part of that is that when you get, especially as an entrepreneur, get head down in the work and you're not looking up, you miss things like that. That's what you miss.
right. Yeah.
Um.
And I think if you look
So.
at a lot of modern companies, so I mean, I think Twitter is a great example. They are not doing today what they originally set out to be. And had
Hmm.
they stuck the course, and I don't know what the pivotal point for them was, but they made a shift, they made a change, and it was probably because of something they saw, or some client said this, or whatever, or some
Yeah.
niche they fell into by doing the other stuff, like they wouldn't be around, right? And I think that
Right.
that's
Yeah.
an important key is you can be focused on your mission, but you got to be cognizant of what's going around. And I'll tell you, one of the hard thing for a young entrepreneur to do is hear feedback from a client, right? Saying, hey, I don't
Yeah.
really like this feature,
Yeah.
I don't like this. Got to be able to listen to your client.
And not have too much pride to think that
No,
your solution is
you
perfect.
can't you
Yeah.
can't have big egos being an entrepreneur.
Right. That's right. Well, okay, so I feel like that kind of covers the no phase. So when we talk about growing the business, which I feel like you've done, and one thing I want to say about you and brag on you about because I picked up on it is that, and this is what I love about just entrepreneurship in general, but also people who are open-minded to see a skill set and not like have to box it in. So you have found people that are really good at particular things
Hmm.
and you're not like they don't have to exclusively work with you or like obviously like if you find an expert at something you're trusting them to do it because they're good at it
Yep.
and and not necessarily
Hire
like so
hire good smart people and get out of their way.
right, right. So I feel like you've done that just having met several members of your team. You've done that, and there's again no ego there. It's hiring the right people, and then also, like you said, getting out of their way, understanding that they know what they do, and you being open-minded enough to listen to them. So that I
Right.
think, without you saying it, is a key to your success and growing. But you talk about, I mean, have there been any challenges or kind of forks in the road from a growth perspective there's always like personnel and people stuff that I feel like sticks out because it's hard, that's really hard. But then also just like growing pains, and I guess that pivot could also count as like a growth, challenge. But what in the growing of the business, what kind of decisions have you had to make that have been hard to make, or maybe not hard to make, maybe easy to make as you've grown Botdoc?
So, excuse me. That's a big question. I'll tell you this.
Or do
So
you feel like everything's fallen into place? You can say everybody that I've hired has been great and it's all fallen into place.
no
So,
way, no way.
but
So that definitely growing pains, and I think for me, like when it's early on as an entrepreneur, you're going to do everything, right? So like I did the
right,
finances
say
originally,
yes to everything.
right? I
Yeah,
did all the marketing. I was doing all the sales, right? I was just having to figure everything out, right? And
right.
you know, I think a lot of people think initially that, you know what, I'm just going to do it. right? It costs that costs money. In some respects, that's okay. But if it's big stuff like, how to create what kind of entity to use, right? Man, hire a good attorney, get all that stuff lined out
Right.
initially. Um, like we were at a point where, outbound marketing, and lead gen and, squeeze page, landing page optimization, all that stuff. Like, sure, I can go out and read books. I can do that, but man,
Right.
um,
Is
so
that worth your time?
right, it's tough. So having a military background, I think about the military a lot. And in like running the business, not that we're up, in the morning running sprints or, doing PT or anything, but no, but I think about military and also think about sports. So like one of the things we talk about all the time is team sports. That's super important to me. Like, in fact,
Hmm.
that's actually one of my requirements. It's not a requirement, but it's highly,
Hmm.
it's a checkbox. Is, I want people that have
Hmm.
played team sports, even if it was in high school, right? Because
Hmm.
when you have to play
Hmm.
and it's not all about you, like you understand, like you play a role, and sometimes
Yeah,
other people get credit, right? And it's not all about you all the time. And I think that's super important because,
that's good.
for us, uh, and honestly, that's kind of how we run the team, right? So I look at,
Hmm.
like, there may be people that, so like if I think about coaching football, um, you work with the guys all week long, right? Day in, day out in the off season, you know what their capabilities are. They've shown you, you know, sparks of great plays that they made, great agility, whatever. Your goal as the coach is to really kind of hone in on that and bring the best out of them, right? Because once they're on the
Right.
field, like you can't go and do it for them. You can't hold their hand, right? They've got to be able to perform.
Right.
You got to be able to motivate them to do that. Same thing like if you were a captain of a ship. I mean, think about the old ships, right? Or even today, right?
Yeah.
Big, even aircraft carriers or whatever. The captain can't go down and, you know, increase the power.
Right.
He can't go
Right.
do stuff on the deck or whatever. He's
Yeah.
got to be able to trust his people and have people doing those current roles. So again, like I said initially, hire good people, expect a lot of them, but also get out of their way, right?
Yeah.
Because that will
That's good.
demotivate a person in a heartbeat, right? You start micromanaging them,
Yeah.
um, and not letting them kind of own their space.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, so scaling. I feel like this is where you are now. Like you're set up, you've reached a place where you have all the people in the right places, I think. I mean, I'm sure there's always, as you scale, there's always more, you always need more people. But
Yeah,
so what are you excited about? Do you feel like you're in place to scale? I mean, one of the things that's unique about what you do is you're not necessarily, you obviously have a lot of clients in certain industries, but the technology that you're using is not necessarily industry specific. So you can
right.
scale as much as you want to scale. So talk about that. Like, what are you excited about? What do you feel like, if you think of any hurdles, might be hurdles in scaling, or what have you already experienced?
Yeah,
What's next for Botdoc?
yeah. I think a lot of people talk about what's your go to market strategy, what's your go to market plan, and this whatever. Again, plans are great until you start executing them, and then you got to change them, right?
Right.
Very
Yeah.
rarely that your plan is like rock solid and you never change, right? You're always going to
Right.
have to shift and make adjustments. So I think a lot of early, right, when you're getting to know your company, you may know your product, but you don't know how people are going to use it. You may not even know the language that resonates with people, right? You may be speaking
Yeah.
about it as you and I have talked about this a lot. You may be speaking about it one way,
Yeah.
but they like, what the hell are you talking about? So that there's a
Right.
disconnect,
Right.
and what you think the value is may be something different to them, right? So it's really trying to understand that.
Right.
How do you communicate? But even with that, when you go to market with a specific, and when I say go to market, I don't mean like your entire global strategy for like until the end of time. It's like, hey, how do we get into this
Right.
niche, right? Like we have a niche
Right.
with
Right.
community banks and credit unions, right? So community banks may have one branch, some have 15 branches plus, right? And we have a specific product for them that works, right? So that's a specific niche area
Right.
that we, what's our go to market in that area?
Yeah.
And again, it's always going to change. And I think that
Yeah.
that's one of the kind of the key parameters is you have to be able to experiment and test. And like, there's this term that says fail quick, right? Even in the
Mm-hmm.
development side, fail quick. Because you go out and build
Yeah.
something that's really, really cool based on your perception of the world. But if nobody uses
Yeah.
it, then it's a waste of time. So sometimes, same thing I
Right.
would say with sales and marketing. Um, we've done some stuff that didn't work out exactly how we
I
wanted it
was
to.
about to say,
Yeah,
I've already shown you how I can fail quick.
but no, I mean, but
But
it's
you
something.
learn, you
Yeah,
learn, you always learn.
it's something
Yeah.
we agreed on. And you and I have talked. You said, "Hey, if we were to do this again, what we've done different."
Right.
And you and I had feedback different points, and I think that's only going to make it's going to make this relationship in our strategy
Right.
even in stronger on other
Right.
stuff. So I
And
think
there's
you have.
always a pivot plan. You always have a pivot plan. Like you always have that
Yeah, you're
backup
like,
to do
okay,
that.
well, then we're going to do this, right? It's like,
Right.
perfect. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
So like, I trust you that if you're always going to help us figure out the best plan of attack, right? Based on the knowledge that we
Yeah.
have. Um, and
Yeah.
I think anytime you are an entrepreneur, you're typically selling something different or something, a new mousetrap or something that's totally different. So you have to expect that people are not going to react the way you think, right? Because
Mhm.
people may have been in your situation, but not in the exact same scenario, right?
Right.
So you do have to adjust all the time, and I think that's where we talk about kind of that emotional balance where you're gonna have super highs, where you're gonna have a win with a client. You're like, sweet man, I'm top of the world. We're just gonna
Right.
keep doing this, and then you get to the next one, you're like, ah, crap. Like somebody may say,
Right.
this is horrible. I would never use this product. Right? Most people are like, well,
Right.
this sucks. Maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. There have been days, I will tell you, Laura, there have been days, less and less as time has gone on, but there's been days where I'm like, what am I doing? Right? Like, should I even be doing
Yeah.
this? Like, what am I?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's good for entrepreneurs to hear, I think, because I think we all need to remind ourselves that it's not like every day you wake up
no.
with that. What does Dolly Parton say? Pour herself a cup of ambition, like you don't
Look at
in the
you.
9 to 5
Look at you,
side.
old school country. I'm impressed.
Yeah, but you don't always just, fill up the more coffee you drink and have, I mean, sometimes you do, but not always. So I
No,
think it's good to just know that there are down days. That doesn't mean you made the wrong
I think
decision. It just means that it's hard.
emotional balance, and you have to have a North Star. You have to have something that's
Yeah.
guiding you, right?
Yeah.
So
And a good family or close friends or good support system
yeah,
around you too.
absolutely. So like
Yeah.
early on, we did talk, even though I wasn't in the Navy, I was in the Air Force, but we talked about like a ship, right? So think about,
Hmm.
you know, hundreds of years ago, right? Before GPS, I'm sure if you could chart their path, right? They went like this and this and
Right.
this, right? It wasn't a straight
Right.
line, but they knew they had that North Star that was guiding them. They knew if they didn't have
Right.
that, they would have ended up like who knows where.
Who
So
knows
I think
where? Right.
as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to have that guiding principle or that guiding place, not a physical place, but kind of where you're going, so that when you go here, you can chart back, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah. That's good. Well, I like to keep this podcast like a commute time. So just so folks that are listening can get what they need out of it and carry on
Sure.
with their day with their cup
Well,
of
this
ambition. But
a commute in Mississippi versus a commute in Houston.
true, very true.
Yeah,
You
commute in
don't have
Houston,
more
we
than
got
20
we got
minutes.
another hour if it's Houston. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me just if you had one thing you could say to somebody who was in the either like the same place as you, as far as like in the beginnings of really scaling up, or in the crux of like figuring out what they want to do and how what they say about what they do and all that type of. So basically, like from the no side, the growth side, or the scale side, what would be your advice to an entrepreneur or fellow business owner?
So there's different stages of your company. You need to understand those different stages. So like the stage we're in now, what's going to get us from where we're at now to 10 times what we're doing in revenue is um, um, procedures, right? We have to have documented procedures on, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we want to generate. Hey, we want to generate this much revenue. This is what we need to do here because we're not going to get everybody. So we have more of a structure in place and building more and more structure to our process to get to goals. Early on, it's more ad hoc, right? You can put put a plan in place, but you gotta be able to, focus on something and then change. And if it doesn't work, you
be flexible.
Right. So I would say, especially early on, persistence. Persistence is the key, right? Because you don't know when that first sale is going to be, right? It could be the first one.
Right.
And then it could take you 50 more before the next sale. So I think that's key for anybody is persistence, because too many people give up too soon.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you. There's so much we could have part 2, and we probably will have part 2 at some point, because I feel like there's really about
there's more. There's many other chapters. That's right.
We'll have a Houston commute version another time. But thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you spending time. I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah, you bet.